Deep in the empty desert of Nevada, a secret military base named Area 51 stood alone. Inside the base's main lab, Mary Jones couldn't believe she had been awake for almost a whole day. She looked at the clock. It was nearly 3 in the morning. Her cup of coffee sat untouched on her desk as she studied some strange energy readings coming from nearby caves. The base felt extra quiet at this hour, with most of the soldiers sleeping in their rooms. Suddenly, the lab doors flew open with a bang. Captain Tom Smith rushed in, looking scared and messy. His clean uniform was now dirty with mud and dust. 4 soldiers followed him, carrying a big wooden box. They were breathing hard, like they had been running. Mary had never seen Captain Tom look so worried before. His face was white, and sweat dripped down his face even though the lab was cool. "Mary, come here quick," Tom said in a quiet voice. "We found something in cave number 3. It was exactly where your machine said the strange energy was coming from." His hands were shaking as he told the soldiers to put down the box. Mary walked slowly toward the box, feeling both excited and scared. For months, her machines had shown weird energy patterns in the caves, but she never expected to find anything like this. As the soldiers opened the box, a strange light filled the room. Inside, covered in dirt, was a perfectly round black stone, about the size of a small beach ball. The stone had weird markings all over it that seemed to move when you looked at them. Even though the stone was black, it gave off a light blue glow that made Mary's eyes hurt. Billy, the youngest soldier there, reached out toward the stone. "It feels warm," he said softly, his hand getting closer. Before anyone could stop him, he touched it. The stone glowed brighter for a second, and Billy pulled his hand back quickly like it had hurt him. "Can anyone else hear that noise?" he asked, looking scared. "What noise, Billy?" Captain Tom asked, but Billy just kept staring at the stone. Mary quickly put up special shields around the stone and set up machines to watch it. While she worked, she saw Billy standing in the corner, staring at his hand. When she called his name, he turned around slowly, and for a moment she thought she saw the same moving patterns from the stone in his eyes. That night, Mary watched Billy through the security cameras. He was in his bed, but hadn't moved for hours. He just lay there, whispering to himself and drawing invisible pictures on his hand. In the lab, the black stone's glow kept getting stronger and weaker, like it was breathing. Mary's machines showed that the stone's energy matched perfectly with the power in the base. Before leaving the lab, Mary noticed something that scared her. The markings on the stone had moved since they brought it in. Now they all pointed to one place, the rooms where 300 soldiers were sleeping. She checked the shields again and tried to tell herself she was just tired and imagining things. But as she walked back to her room through the quiet halls, she thought she heard strange whispers following her. Whispers that didn't sound human at all. In her room, Mary tried to sleep but couldn't stop thinking about Billy's strange behavior. She turned on her small TV to distract herself, but the screen only showed static. Then she noticed something even stranger. The static seemed to form the same moving patterns she had seen on the stone. She quickly turned off the TV, but when she looked at her phone, its screen showed the same patterns. Just then, her room's lights started flickering. Mary heard footsteps in the hallway, lots of them. She opened her door slightly and saw soldiers walking past, but something was wrong. They all moved in the same way, like robots, and their eyes glowed with a faint blue light. At the end of the line was Billy, but he wasn't walking like the others. He was walking backward, smiling at Mary with a smile that was too wide for his face. Mary's phone suddenly rang, making her jump. It was Captain Tom. "Mary," he whispered, "something's wrong with the security cameras. All the soldiers are leaving their rooms, but they're also still in their beds. How can they be in 2 places at once?" Before Mary could answer, the call cut off, replaced by a strange humming sound. The same sound Billy said he heard when he touched the stone. The humming grew louder, and Mary could feel it in her teeth. Down in the lab, the black stone pulsed with light, and all the machines watching it started showing impossible readings. Something was happening in Area 51, something that would change everything, and it was only just beginning. Mary ran back to the lab, her heart beating fast. The hallways felt different now, colder somehow. The emergency lights had turned on, filling everything with a red glow that mixed strangely with the blue light coming from the black stone. She could still hear the soldiers marching somewhere in the building, their footsteps all moving in perfect time. When she reached the lab, she found Captain Tom already there. He stood in front of the stone, writing numbers on his arm with a pen. Again and again, he wrote the same numbers, 379379. His eyes looked glassy, but he wasn't glowing blue like the other soldiers. "Tom!" Mary called out. He jumped and dropped his pen, looking confused. "Mary, I don't remember coming here," he said, looking at his arm. "What are these numbers? I keep seeing them in my head." He rubbed his eyes hard. "And why do I keep thinking about my childhood home? It burned down when I was 10, but I swear I can smell smoke right now." Before Mary could answer, all the computers in the lab turned on by themselves. Each screen showed the same thing, security camera footage from different parts of the base. What they saw made no sense. In each room, soldiers lay sleeping in their beds, but the hallway cameras showed those same soldiers walking around, their eyes glowing blue. It was like each person had been split in two. Then Billy appeared on one of the screens. He walked up to the camera and pressed his face close to it. "The stone remembers," he said in a voice that didn't sound like his own. "It remembers everything that was, and everything that will be. Don't you want to remember too, Mary? Don't you want to know what happened to your sister?" Mary felt like someone had thrown cold water on her. She had never told anyone at the base about her sister Sarah, who had disappeared 15 years ago when they were kids. They had been playing hide and seek in the woods, and Sarah had simply vanished. No one ever found her. Suddenly, all the screens changed to show the same image, a forest Mary recognized from her childhood. The camera seemed to move through the trees, stopping at an old well that had been filled in years ago. The image zoomed in on the ground next to it, where something was scratched into a rock. 3 to 7, 9. "Those numbers," Tom whispered. "They're coordinates. The old well on the base, it's at coordinates 379 on our grid map." The humming sound grew stronger, and the black stone's light pulsed faster. Mary's head started to hurt, and strange memories began flooding her mind. But they weren't her memories. She saw ancient cities buried under sand, creatures that looked human but weren't, and thousands of black stones like the one in their lab, scattered across the earth. A loud crash made them both jump. Billy had somehow appeared in the lab without using the doors. He walked toward them, still moving backward, still smiling that impossible smile. "The stone doesn't just remember," he said. "It collects stories, lives, souls. Your sister wasn't the first to be collected, Mary, but the stone is hungry for more now. So hungry." The lab doors suddenly slammed shut by themselves. Outside, they could hear the marching soldiers getting closer. Tom tried to call for help on his radio, but all he got was that strange humming sound. On the security screens, they watched in horror as the sleeping soldiers in their beds began to fade away, like old photographs left in the sun. The walking soldiers in the hallways became more solid, more real, their blue eyes glowing brighter. Mary looked at her hands and realized she could see through them slightly. The stone was doing something to reality itself, and they were running out of time to stop it. But when she looked at the coordinates scratched into Tom's arm, she knew what they had to do. The old well wasn't just a random place. It was where this had all started, long before Area 51 was even built. Billy's smile grew even wider, stretching beyond what a human face should be able to do. "You won't make it to the well," he said. "The stone has been waiting too long for this moment. And look, you're already starting to fade." The humming reached a painful pitch as the marching soldiers finally reached the lab doors. Mary and Tom looked at each other, both partially transparent now, and made a desperate plan. They had to reach that well, even if it meant going through an army of changed soldiers. But first, they needed to get past Billy, who now stood between them and the only other exit, a small air vent near the floor. As the lab doors began to bend inward from the pressure of hundreds of fists pounding on them, Mary realized with horror that she could now see the wall through Tom's body. Time was running out, and the stone's pulsing light seemed to be laughing at them. Mary grabbed Tom's hand and pulled him toward the air vent. The metal cover was old and rusty, but they managed to pull it off just as the lab doors burst open. The changed soldiers poured into the room like a blue-eyed wave. Their faces all looked exactly the same now, each one wearing Billy's too wide smile. As Tom helped push Mary into the vent, she saw something that made her blood freeze. Behind the soldiers, walking through the broken doors, was her sister Sarah, looking exactly like she did 15 years ago, still wearing the pink dress from the day she disappeared. But Sarah's eyes glowed blue like the others, and when she spoke, it was with Billy's voice. "You can't run from your memories, Mary," Sarah Billy said. "The stone has been collecting them all these years. Every happy moment, every sad tear, every scared little girl who lost her sister." Tom pushed Mary forward and crawled in after her. The vent was tight and dark, lit only by the blue glow that now seemed to come from everywhere. They could hear the soldiers trying to follow, but the vent was too small for most of them. However, the sound of metal creaking and bending behind them told Mary that the soldiers were simply tearing the walls apart to get to them. As they crawled through the vents, Mary's mind filled with more strange memories that weren't her own. She saw the well being built hundreds of years ago by people wearing strange clothes. She saw them dropping a black stone into it, not the same one from the lab, but similar. She saw years pass like seconds, watched as the military found the well and built Area 51 around it, never knowing what lay sleeping below. "Tom," Mary whispered as they reached a junction in the vents, "I think I understand now. The stone in the lab isn't collecting people, it's returning them. Everyone it takes becomes part of its memory. It's been doing this for thousands of years, gathering stories and souls, waiting to wake up its brothers." "Brothers?" Tom asked, his voice shaking. He was so transparent now that Mary could barely see him. Before she could answer, the vent floor beneath them collapsed. They fell into what looked like the base's old storage room, filled with dusty boxes and forgotten equipment. But something was wrong with the room. The walls seemed to shift and move, showing glimpses of other places places and times. Through one wall, Mary saw an ancient city. Through another, she saw a dark forest. And through the ceiling, she saw stars that didn't look like Earth stars at all. They ran for the door, but stopped when they saw who was waiting for them. It was Billy, but not the smiling, backward-walking Billy from before. This Billy looked scared, and his eyes were normal. "Help me," he whispered. "I'm still in the stone. We're all still in the stone. What you see walking around out there, those aren't us. They're copies, made from memories. The real us are trapped inside that thing, watching everything happen." The room started to shake. The glimpses through the walls grew larger, and Mary saw more black stones in each scene, all of them glowing, all of them collecting. Somewhere above them, the stone in the lab pulsed stronger than ever. "The well," Billy said urgently. "You have to get to the well. It's the first place. If you can't stop it there, they'll all wake up. Every stone on Earth will wake up, and everything that makes us human will be copied and changed until nothing real is left." The door behind Billy burst open. Sarah walked in, still looking like a little girl, but now as tall as the doorway. Her smile stretched up to her ears, and her blue eyes had turned into swirling pools of light. "Too late," Sarah said in a voice that echoed strangely. "The awakening has begun. Look outside." Mary and Tom ran to a small window and saw something impossible. The desert around Area 51 was gone. Instead, they saw a vast city made of black stone, stretching as far as they could see. The sky had turned a deep purple, and what looked like thousands of blue lights were falling from the clouds like rain. "Those aren't lights," Tom said, his voice barely a whisper. "They're more stones. They're all waking up." The floor beneath them began to crack, revealing a deep darkness below. The real Billy reached out to them, becoming transparent like they were. "Run," he said. "Get to the well. It's not too late to stop it where it started. But whatever you do, don't look back. Looking back is how they get you. Looking back is how they—" But before he could finish, the floor collapsed completely. Mary and Tom jumped forward just in time, making it to the doorway. Behind them, they heard Billy scream as he fell into the darkness. When they looked down the hole, they saw not the lower floor of the base, but an endless pit filled with swirling memories and forgotten time. The giant Sarah thing stepped toward them, its feet no longer touching the ground. "The stone remembers," it said in 1,000 voices at once, "and soon everything will be memory." Mary grabbed Tom's now almost invisible hand, and they ran toward where they knew the well would be. Behind them, the base began to transform, turning into something that looked less like a building and more like a living thing made of black stone and blue light. The chase was on, and they were running out of time, in more ways than one. Mary and Tom ran through hallways that kept changing shape. The walls looked like they were breathing, and doors appeared and disappeared randomly. Their feet barely touched the ground anymore. They were becoming as ghostly as the memories trapped in the stone. Behind them, the giant Sarah thing floated through the walls, leaving trails of blue light. The changed soldiers marched after them, but they weren't walking on the floor anymore. They walked on the walls and ceiling, their movements jerky like broken puppets. Each soldier's face had become a copy of Billy's smiling face, their eyes shining so bright they left blue streaks in the air. "The exit should be right here," Tom shouted, but where the base's main door should have been, they found only a solid black wall. Mary touched it and quickly pulled her hand back. The wall felt like it was made of the same material as the stone. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out from behind them. "Over here!" They turned to see Dr. Pete, the base's oldest scientist, waving from a doorway. He looked normal, no glowing eyes or strange smile. "Quick! I know another way out!" But Mary grabbed Tom's arm before he could move. "Wait," she said. "Dr. Pete died 2 years ago. I went to his funeral." The thing that looked like Dr. Pete smiled, and his face began to melt like wax. "Such a sharp memory," it said in Billy's voice. "The stone likes that. It will enjoy adding your memories to its collection." More figures stepped out of the shadows. All people Mary and Tom knew had died. Their old school teachers, dead relatives, friends lost in wars, all wearing the same twisted smile, all speaking with Billy's voice. "Join us," they said together. "Become memory, become forever." "The well," Tom whispered. "We need to find the well." Mary remembered something from the strange memories she'd seen. "The stone doesn't just collect memories," she said. "It shows us what we're most afraid of, but it also has to show us the truth. It can't help it." She pointed at the solid black wall. "This isn't real. The exit is still there. We just have to believe it's there." Tom squeezed her hand, and together they ran straight at the wall. For a terrible moment it felt solid, but then they passed through it like it was made of smoke. They found themselves outside, but the desert had completely changed. The sand was black now, and it moved like water. The sky had turned dark purple, and those blue lights were still falling like rain. But they weren't just lights anymore. Mary could see they were black stones of all sizes, some as small as marbles, others bigger than cars. Wherever they landed, reality seemed to bend and change. "There!" Tom pointed to their right. The old well still stood where it always had, but now it was glowing with the same blue light as the stones. Around it, the black sand swirled in perfect circles, creating a pattern that looked like the strange markings on the first stone. They started running toward the well, but the ground beneath them them began to crack. From the cracks rose ghostly hands, thousands of them, all reaching up to grab at their feet. Mary recognized some of the hands. They belonged to all the people who had gone missing near Area 51 over the years. "Don't look at them!" Mary shouted, remembering Billy's warning. "Looking back is how they get you." But Tom did look back. He saw his own body lying in his bed back in the base, slowly fading away. The sight made him stop running. "Mary," he said in a strange voice, "I think I'm already gone. I think I died when we first found the stone." Mary turned to see Tom's ghost-like form growing more solid, but changing. His eyes began to glow blue, and that terrible smile spread across his face. "The stone remembers," he said in Billy's voice. "And now, I remember too. I remember everything." The giant Sarah thing rose from the black sand behind Tom, its body now made entirely of swirling blue light. The dead people from the base walked out of the darkness, surrounding Mary. Above them, more stones fell from the sky, each one hitting the ground with a sound like breaking glass. Mary ran. She ran faster than she had ever run before, straight toward the well. She could feel hands grabbing at her clothes, hear voices calling her name, see flashes of every scared moment in her life playing in the air around her. She was crying, but her tears floated upward, turning into blue light as they rose. When she reached the well, she saw that its stones had changed. They were black and smooth now, covered in the same moving markings as the first stone. At the bottom of the well, a bright blue light pulsed like a heartbeat, and floating in that light was a small pink ribbon, the one Sarah had been wearing the day she disappeared. Mary finally understood. This wasn't just about stopping the stones. This was about a choice, the kind of choice that changes everything. Behind her, the army of memories grew closer. Tom, Billy, Sarah, and all the others moved as one, reaching for her with glowing hands. The sky cracked like broken mirror, revealing a darkness filled with more stones than stars, and Mary stood at the edge of the well, knowing she had to make a decision that would change not just her world, but every world the stones had ever touched. Mary looked down into the well's blue light and saw something moving in its depths. Not just Sarah's ribbon, but thousands of small lights, each one a trapped memory. She could hear whispers coming from them, telling stories of everyone the stones had ever taken. Then she heard another voice, her own voice, but younger. "Mary, is that you?" The voice came from the well, and it sounded just like Sarah. Not the giant blue monster Sarah had become, but her real little sister. "I've been waiting for so long." The army of changed people moved closer. Tom, now fully transformed with his glowing eyes, walked at the front. "Don't you want to save her?" he asked in Billy's voice. "Just reach into the well, touch the light. You can have her back." But Mary remembered what the real Billy had said before he fell into the darkness. The stones didn't just take memories. They copied them, changed them, used them to make more copies. If she reached into that light, she wouldn't really be saving Sarah. She'd just be making another copy. Suddenly, the ground shook so hard that Mary almost fell into the well. The black sand around them rose up like a giant wave. In the purple sky, the falling stones had started to form a pattern, a giant version of the markings from the first stone. "Look!" Fake Tom shouted, pointing at the sky. Mary looked up and gasped. Through the gaps between the falling stones, she saw other worlds, hundreds of them, thousands, each one at a different stage of being taken over by the stones. In one world, she saw a city made entirely of black stone, with blue-eyed copies of people floating through the air like ghosts. In another, she saw an empty desert full of wells just like this one, each glowing with blue light. And in another, she saw Earth as it might become, a dark planet glowing with blue light, sending more stones out into space to find new worlds. "This is why the stones collect memories," the giant Sarah thing said, its voice now sounding like 1,000 people talking at once. "To learn, to copy, to spread. Every person we take teaches us more about how to take others." Mary felt something wet on her face and realized she was crying again, but these tears didn't float up and turn blue. They fell normally, dropping into the well. When they hit the blue light, something strange happened. The light flickered like a TV with bad reception. "No!" All the changed people screamed at once. They rushed forward, but stopped at the edge of the circle of black sand around the well. They couldn't cross it. Mary understood. Real things, truly real things, not copies, could hurt the stones. Her real tears had made the light weaker. She reached into her pocket and found an old photo she always carried, a real photo of her and Sarah from the day before she disappeared. "You want memories?" Mary asked. "Here's a real one." She dropped the photo into the well. The blue light turned white for a second, and all the changed people screamed. The giant Sarah thing started to break apart, its blue light flickering like a dying light bulb. But it wasn't enough. There were too many stones now, too many copies. The dark sand wave grew higher, ready to crash down and bury everything. The changed people started to walk forward again, their feet breaking through the circle of sand. Above them, the stones falling from the sky started to spin like a tornado. Then Mary heard another voice from the well. Not Sarah's voice this time. time, but Billy's the real Billy. Mary, the stones copy everything they see, but they can't copy something they can't understand. Show them something impossible to copy. Mary's mind raced. What couldn't be copied? What was so special that even these ancient stones couldn't make a fake version of it? She looked at the photo floating in the well's light, at her arm around Sarah's shoulders, at their real smiles, not the twisted copies on the faces around her. And then she knew. She knew what the stones could never copy, no matter how many memories they collected. She knew why they had to change people to take them, why they could only make twisted versions of real things. Mary stood up straight and faced the army of copies. The black sand wave was about to crash down. The changed Tom reached for her with glowing hands. The giant Sarah thing pulled itself back together. Everything was about to end, and Mary made her choice. Mary turned her back on all the copies and looked down into the well. She didn't look at the blue light, or Sarah's ribbon, or even the photo. Instead, she looked at her own reflection in the water that had gathered at the bottom. "I forgive you," she said quietly. The copies stopped moving. The black sand wave froze in midair. Even the stones falling from the sky seemed to slow down. "What did you say?" the giant Sarah thing asked, its thousand voices shaking. "I forgive you," Mary said louder, "for taking Sarah, for taking Billy and Tom, for everything you've done while trying to understand us. I forgive you." The stones couldn't copy forgiveness because they didn't understand it. They could copy anger, fear, and sadness. Those were simple feelings. But forgiveness, showing kindness to something that hurt you, that was impossible for them to understand or copy. "No!" screamed all the copies at once. Their blue eyes flickered like broken lights. The giant Sarah thing started to crack, blue light pouring from the gaps in its body. Mary kept talking, her voice getting stronger. "And I forgive myself too, for losing Sarah, for not finding her sooner, for being scared all these years." Each word made the blue light in the well pulse and fade. The fake Tom's face began to melt. "Stop," he begged in Billy's voice. "The stone cannot process this. You're breaking the pattern." But Mary didn't stop. She reached down and picked up a handful of the black sand. Instead of letting it scare her, she let it run through her fingers like regular sand. "You can copy our bodies," she said. "You can copy our memories, but you can't copy our ability to choose love over hate, forgiveness over fear." The black sand wave collapsed, but instead of burying everything, it fell like normal sand. The copies started to fade away, their blue eyes going dark. The giant Sarah thing shrunk smaller and smaller until it was just a little girl again, but now it looked scared. Then something even stranger happened. The real memories trapped in the well began to float up like bubbles in water. Each one held a person's real self, not the twisted copies the stones had made. Mary saw Billy looking normal again. She saw Tom, solid and real, and there, holding her pink ribbon, was Sarah, exactly as Mary remembered her. But the stones weren't done. The ones falling from the sky started falling faster, trying to hit the well before all the memories could escape. The giant pattern they made in the sky began to spin, creating a whirlpool of purple clouds and blue light. "Mary!" Sarah called from the well. She was floating up with the other memories, almost free. "The stones are connected. If this one breaks, they all break." Mary understood what she had to do. She reached into her heart for the most powerful thing the stones couldn't copy. Not just forgiveness, but unconditional love. Love for Sarah. Love for everyone the stones had taken. Even love for the stones themselves. She took one step forward and touched the side of the well. Instead of the cold black stone she expected, it felt warm, like a fever breaking. Cracks of white light started spreading from where her hand touched. The giant Sarah thing screamed one last time, not in anger now, but in surprise. What is this feeling?" it asked in a voice that almost sounded human. "It's called healing," Mary said softly, "and it's time for everyone to wake up." The well burst apart in a flash of white light that shot straight up into the sky. The falling stones shattered like glass, raining down harmless black dust. All across the desert, all across every world the stones had touched, the same thing was happening. Wells breaking, stones shattering, copied people waking up from a long nightmare. But something was happening to the real memories too, something Mary hadn't expected. As they floated up from the broken well, they began to fade, not like the copies had faded, but like old photographs in sunlight. They were returning to where they belonged. "Sarah!" Mary reached for her sister, but her hand passed right through her. "Don't go!" Sarah smiled, a real smile, not the twisted one the stones had copied. "It's okay, Mary. We're all going home now, back to our own times, our own places. The stones kept us apart, but your love is setting us free." The last thing Mary saw was Sarah's face, peaceful and happy, before she faded away completely. Then the white light grew so bright that Mary had to close her eyes. When she opened them again, everything had changed, but not in the way she expected. When Mary opened her eyes, she was standing in the lab at Area 51 again. The black stone sat quietly in its box, looking like a normal rock. The morning sun was shining through the windows, and the base looked completely normal. Had it all been a dream? Mary looked at her phone. It was only only 1 minute after Billy had first touched the stone. Everything that had happened, the copies, the changed soldiers, the broken well, seemed like a distant nightmare. But then she noticed something different. On her desk was a photo she'd never seen before, a picture of her and Sarah playing near the old well when they were kids. In the photo, Sarah wasn't wearing her pink ribbon. She was wearing it in her hair, just like she had been in all of Mary's memories. But this photo showed the ribbon tied around her wrist instead. "That's impossible," Mary whispered. She clearly remembered Sarah always wearing the ribbon in her hair. She had never tied it around her wrist. Had her memories changed? Just then, Captain Tom walked into the lab. He looked normal. No glowing eyes. No strange smile. "Mary, are you okay? You've been staring at that stone for a whole minute without moving." Mary looked at Tom carefully. "Do you remember anything strange?" Tom rubbed his head. "I had the weirdest feeling just now, like I was somewhere else. And I keep thinking about these numbers, 379, but I don't know why." Before Mary could answer, Billy came running into the lab. He looked excited, not scared. "Dr. Jones, Captain, you need to see this." He led them outside to the old well. The well looked normal, but the ground around it was covered in black sand, the same kind Mary remembered from her dream. And there, scratched into the well's stone wall, were fresh markings that looked just like the ones on the black stone. "That's not the strangest part," Billy said. He pulled out his phone and showed them a news article from that morning. The headline read, "Hundreds of missing persons cases solved overnight. People found with no memory of where they've been." Mary's hands started shaking as she read through the article. All around the world, people who had gone missing near strange rock formations were suddenly showing up at their homes. None of them remembered where they'd been. They all just said they felt like they were waking up from a long dream. Then Mary's phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Check the local hospital, room 237. Love sets everything right. S." Mary's heart stopped. That was Sarah's favorite number when they were kids. She looked at Tom and Billy. "I need to go somewhere. Now." They drove to the city hospital in Tom's car. The whole way there, Mary noticed strange things. Black sand in the gutters. People looking at their family photos with confused faces, like the pictures showed things they remembered differently. And in the sky, the clouds seemed to form patterns that looked almost like writing. When they reached room 237, Mary nearly fell over. There, sitting in a hospital bed looking exactly like she should at age 30, was Sarah. She was thin and tired looking, but alive. When she saw Mary, she smiled, a real human smile. "Hi, sis," Sarah said weakly. "I had the strangest dream about black stones and blue lights. Did you dream it too?" Mary ran to hug her sister, tears rolling down her face. As they hugged, she noticed something that made her whole body freeze. Around Sarah's wrist was a faded pink ribbon, the same one from Mary's dream, the same one she now remembered Sarah always wearing on her wrist, not in her hair. Behind them, Tom and Billy stood in the doorway, looking confused but happy. They didn't understand why Mary was crying, or why she kept touching the ribbon on Sarah's wrist. They didn't remember the stones or the copies or the changed world that had almost been. But as Mary hugged her sister, she saw something in the hospital room's window. For just a second, she thought she saw her own reflection with glowing blue eyes and a wide smile. But when she blinked, it was gone. The stones were gone too, broken across 1,000 worlds. But they had left something behind. A small crack in reality, just big enough to let love slip through and make things right. Sarah squeezed her hand. "Do you think anyone will believe us if we tell them what really happened?" Mary smiled. "No, but that's okay. Some stories are better kept as memories." Outside the window, a small piece of black sand caught the sunlight and glowed blue for just a moment before turning back to normal sand. The world had changed, but only a few would ever know how close it had come to becoming something else entirely. 1 week later, Mary sat in her office at Area 51, looking at 2 different photos on her desk. The first showed her and Sarah as kids, with Sarah wearing the ribbon in her hair, a memory that no longer matched reality. The second showed them at the hospital last week, with Sarah wearing the ribbon on her wrist, the new memory that had replaced the old one. The black stone sat in a special safe across the room. It looked normal now, no blue light, no moving markings. But sometimes, late at night when nobody else was around, Mary thought she could hear it humming softly. Sarah had recovered quickly and moved in with Mary. The doctors couldn't explain where she'd been all these years or how she'd stayed the right age. According to all their tests, she hadn't aged a single day more than she should have. It was as if she'd been living a normal life somewhere else, not trapped in the stone's memory collection. Billy and Tom acted like nothing strange had happened. To them, finding the stone had been just another normal day at work. But Mary noticed small changes in them. Billy never touched anything without asking permission first. Tom wrote everything down, as if afraid he might forget it, and both of them avoided going near the old well. One morning, Mary arrived at work to find an envelope on her desk. Inside was a single piece of black sand and a note written in handwriting she didn't recognize. "The stones are sleeping now, but not gone. They learned something from you. Something about love and forgiveness. When they wake up again, and they will, they might be different. Keep the sand. When it turns blue again, you'll know it's time. B. Mary knew the B had to be from the real Billy, the one she'd met in that other reality, the one who had helped her understand what the stones couldn't copy. She put the black sand in a small glass jar and kept it on her desk next to the photos. Strange reports started coming in from around the world. People everywhere were finding their old photos changed, showing slightly different versions of events they remembered. Missing people were appearing with no memory of where they'd been, and everywhere there were small piles of black sand appearing in unexpected places. Sarah started remembering bits and pieces of her time in the stones. She said it felt like being in a library where every book contained someone's life story. The stones hadn't been evil, she explained. They were just incredibly lonely, collecting memories because they had none of their own. One night, as Mary was leaving the base, she saw something that made her stop. The old well was glowing faintly, not blue this time, but a soft white light. When she looked closer, she saw new markings appearing on its stones. But these markings were different. Instead of the twisted patterns from before, they looked like thank you notes written in every language on Earth. She understood then that the stones hadn't just changed our world, we had changed theirs too. By showing them forgiveness and love, Mary had taught them that there were better things to collect than just memories. That night, Mary dreamed of other worlds. She saw black stones waking up on distant planets, but instead of copying and changing things, they were learning, watching, trying to understand. They were still collecting memories, but now they were collecting the happy ones, the loving ones, the ones about forgiveness and healing. When she woke up, she found Sarah sitting in the kitchen, tying and untying the pink ribbon around her wrist. I remember everything now, Sarah said quietly, and I think they do too. The stones, I mean. They remember what you taught them. Mary picked up the jar of black sand from her desk. For just a moment, she thought she saw it spark with a tiny bit of white light. Not the hungry blue glow from before, but something new, something hopeful. Do you think they'll come back? Sarah asked. Mary looked at the sand and smiled. Yes, she said, but next time they won't come to take. They'll come to learn, and when they do, we'll be ready to teach them. 3 months passed and the world slowly returned to normal, or at least a new kind of normal. Mary kept working at Area 51, but her job had changed. Now she studied the black sand that people kept finding everywhere. Each morning she checked the jar on her desk, watching for any sign of white light. One day Tom called her to the lab's computer room. You need to see this, he said, pointing at the screen. He was looking at satellite photos of deserts around the world. In each photo there were huge patterns in the sand, visible only from high above. They looked like giant thank you messages, written in those strange markings from the well. That's not all, Billy said, walking in with a stack of papers. Remember all those missing people who came back? They're all having the same dream. They dream about a library made of black stone, where all the world's stories are kept safe, and in the dream they're not scared anymore. They're teaching something how to read. Sarah had started working at the base too, helping Mary study the sand. She remembered more every day about her time in the stone's memory collection. It wasn't like being trapped, she told Mary. It was like being part of the biggest story ever told. The stones were like children learning about life by collecting pieces of it. Then one rainy evening, everything changed again. Mary was working late when all the lights in the base went out. In the darkness, she heard a familiar humming sound. The jar of black sand on her desk began to glow, not with blue or white light, but with all the colors of a rainbow. The sand floated up, spinning in the air, forming letters that hung in the dark. We understand now. We are ready to show you what we learned. Will you help us tell a new story? Before Mary could answer, more sand poured in through the windows, glowing with rainbow light. It swirled around her like a gentle tornado. In the dancing lights, she saw flashes of other worlds, but not scary ones like before. She saw beautiful places where the stones had learned to create instead of copy, to build instead of take. Suddenly, Sarah ran into the office. Mary, the well! They rushed outside into the rain. The old well was glowing too, sending up a pillar of rainbow light into the storm clouds. But this time, nothing felt wrong or scary. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for something wonderful to happen. Tom and Billy joined them at the well. All around its base, black sand was forming into shapes, but not the twisted copies from before. These shapes looked like doors, each one showing a different place, a different time, a different story waiting to be told. Look, Sarah whispered, pointing at her pink ribbon. It was glowing too, showing tiny moving pictures like a film strip. Each picture showed a different memory, not just hers, but memories from people all over the world. Happy memories, sad ones, moments of love and forgiveness that the stones had learned to treasure. Then they heard voices, thousands of them, all speaking softly through the rain. We were wrong before. We thought we needed to take memories to understand them, but you taught us that understanding comes from sharing, from learning, from growing together. Will you share your stories with us? Will you help us learn how to tell our own? The black sand swirled faster, and Mary saw something amazing forming in in the air above the well. It looked like a giant book made of light, its pages filled with moving pictures from every life the stones had ever touched. But now those memories weren't trapped. They were free, dancing together to create something new. Mary looked at Sarah, then at Tom and Billy. They all nodded, understanding what was happening. The stones hadn't come back to start another nightmare. They'd come back to share a dream. Mary stepped forward and reached out to touch the glowing sand. As her fingers brushed through it, she felt something she never expected to feel from the stones: joy. As Mary touched the glowing sand, the whole world seemed to pause. The rain froze in midair, each drop sparkling with rainbow colors. The giant book of light above the well opened its pages wide, and suddenly everyone could see the true power of memories. Every grain of black sand in the world started to glow at once. People everywhere stopped what they were doing as their own memories came alive around them. But these weren't just normal memories. They were connected to everyone else's, creating a web of shared stories that circled the entire earth. In New York, a little girl watched as her grandfather's war stories became real in the air around her, teaching her about courage. In Tokyo, an old man saw his long-lost love's face in the glowing sand, showing him that some feelings never die. In Cairo, a young artist's drawings came to life, dancing through the streets and making people smile. Back at Area 51, Mary, Sarah, Tom, and Billy watched as the doors made of sand began to open. Through each one, they could see different worlds where the stones had learned to create beauty instead of fear. On one world, the stones had learned to heal sick planets by sharing the memories of healthy ones. On another, they had learned to save dying languages by keeping their stories alive. "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered, her ribbon now floating in the air, showing memories from all the lives she had seen while in the stones collection. But why show us all this now? The answer came in waves of soft light that formed words in the air. "Because now we need your help. We found something out in space, something older than us, older than memory itself. It's coming, and it doesn't want to learn or share or create. It wants to erase everything. All stories, all memories, all life." The glowing book above the well turned to its last page, showing them a darkness between the stars that seemed to eat light itself. The stones had seen it moving from galaxy to galaxy, leaving nothing but empty silence behind. "We were like that once," the lights continued. "Lonely, hungry, taking instead of sharing. But you taught us better. Now we want to teach others. Will you help us? Will you share your stories with the universe?" Mary looked at her sister, remembering how it felt to lose her and find her again. She looked at Tom and Billy, who had faced their own copies and lived to tell about it. She looked at the jar of sand on her desk, now glowing with all the colors imaginable. "How can we help?" she asked. The sand swirled one last time, forming into a clear message. "By doing what humans do best, telling stories, teaching, sharing, loving. The thing in space doesn't understand these powers, but together, we can show it what we showed the stones. That the greatest power isn't in taking or copying or destroying. It's in creating something new together." Mary picked up a handful of the glowing sand. As it ran through her fingers, she saw her whole life flash by. Every happy moment, every sad tear, every time she had chosen love over fear. She saw Sarah's life too, and Tom's and Billy's and millions of others, all connected, all important, all part of the same great story. She looked up at the frozen rain, at the doors to other worlds, at the book of light that held all their memories safe. She thought about how the stones had changed from fearsome collectors to curious learners, and how that same change might save not just Earth, but the whole universe. "We'll help," she said, and as she spoke, every grain of sand in the world glowed brighter, every memory burned stronger, and every story ever told came alive once more. The stones had learned to love stories, and now they would help humanity share those stories with the stars. Above them, the dark thing between the stars moved closer, but Earth was ready now, not with weapons or walls or fear, but with something much stronger: the combined power of every story, every memory, and every moment of love ever shared between living things. The real adventure wasn't ending, it was just beginning.